Did you know that 71% of the people that watch Matthew Kelly's videos are not subscribers? That makes no sense. We need to change that. Subscribe today. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications so you never miss out on another great video ever again.
You've got a distorted image of God. I know how that might sound. How do I know that? I mean, I don't know you. I know that because we all do. We all have distorted images of God. There are many things that have happened in our lives, many things we've learned, many things we've experienced, many things we've been told about God that aren't true, or that we've heard in the wrong way, or we haven't heard completely or absorbed completely. And so we have a distorted image of God, and this is a critical issue if we're going to grow spiritually, if we're going to have vibrant human relationships, and I'll explain the connection a little bit later. It's so important that we continue to align our image of God with the reality of God. How do you see God? What's your image of God? Do you see God as a loving father, or do you see God as a wrathful father? Depending on what your own experience of a worldly father was, it could have a massive impact on your image of God as Father. Do you see God as close and personal, or do you see God as distant and impersonal? These are just two ways to explore the image of God. And of course, there are hundreds of ways to explore the image of God. And the way we see God affects the way we see ourselves and the way we see others. That's why the image of God is so critically important. What is your image of God? When was the last time you thought about it? Most of us are collecting little pieces of our image of God, and we put it together in our hearts and our souls, but we don't necessarily ever sit back and say, okay, what is my image of God? Is my image of God, does it align with reality, the reality of who God is? And of course, very often it doesn't. There are things about our image of God that are projections of ourselves, projections of bad experiences or good experiences from the past that don't necessarily align with the characteristics of God. When we think about the characteristics of God, there are all sorts of characteristics that we throw around all the time. I list some of them in the book, Infinite, eternal, good, self-sufficient, ever-present, generous, holy, personal, gracious, loving, wise, mysterious, all-powerful, one, providential, righteous, just, transcendent, truthful, eternal, patient, free, immutable, approachable, peaceful, perfect, compassionate, beautiful, praiseworthy, and on and on and on. We have all of these attributes. What I want to encourage you to do is to think about 2 or 3 of the critical attributes of God that are important to you. What makes them important? Whatever helps you to connect with God. Whatever helps you to connect with God is an important attribute of God at this moment in your life. Now, we could do the exercise again in 3 months or 3 years, and very different attributes might be the attributes that help you to connect with God. The beautiful thing about the exercise is that we assume we know God. And what we want to do is we want to set that assumption aside. Because the truth is, whatever it is we know about God, however much we've studied God and His scriptures, however much we've studied theology and religion and spirituality, what we know about God is still just a speck of sand on the beach compared to what we don't know about God. And it's what we don't know about God that we want to explore. It's what we don't know about God that will capture our imagination, fascinate our hearts and minds, and lead us to a new vibrancy in our prayer life, in our spirituality. We're trying to work out, what is God really like? What is God really like? Not, what did my dad say about God, or what did my grandma say about God? What is God really like is what we're trying to discover, to have an experience of the living God. Why does it matter? The idea of the image of God, or our image of God, your image of God. It may seem irrelevant. It may seem peripheral, but it isn't. It does really matter. Why does it really matter? Well, for one, the scriptures tell us you are made in the image of God. You're made in the image of God. And so if we're going to have a healthy image of ourselves, and let's face it, most of us don't. Most of us have distorted images of ourselves. And the reason is because God wants to help us have a healthy, full, wholesome image of ourselves. But in order to hold that image of ourselves, we first have to have a healthy image of God. So our image of self comes from our image of God. So often we meet people or we look at our own children, our own friends, we think, wow, they really have a little bit of a distorted image of themselves. And we wish we could help them adjust their image of themselves to align with reality. That's what God wants to do for you and me. So the image of God matters because it impacts the image you hold of yourself, which has an enormous influence over all of your life. The second reason is because the image you hold of God impacts all of your human relationships. Every single human relationship is impacted by the image you hold of God because it affects the image you have of yourself and in turn affects the image you hold of other people. We'll never have better human relationships than our relationship with God. You know, if our relationship with God is here, we can't expect our relationship with other people to be up here. We never have better human relationships than our relationship with God. And so if you want to have a better marriage, if you want to have a better relationship with your kids, if you want to have a better relationship with your friends, the best way to do that is to raise the bar on your relationship with God, is to take your relationship with God to the next level. The third reason your image of God matters is because nothing will impact your relationship with God more than the image you hold of Him. If you hold this image that God is a distant, anonymous, impersonal, wrathful God, that of course is going to have a massive impact on the way you approach God and the way you relate to God. And so what does prayer do? Prayer, every single day when we come to prayer slowly but surely aligns our image of God with the reality of God. And very often that requires some realignment. But every single day when we come to prayer, what happens? Our image of God is being realigned with the reality of God so that we can relate not with who we imagine God to be, but with who God actually is.